Yeah, a very happy evening to everyone joining from India, and a happy morning to folks from US and Canada. Pleased to welcome you all to this Spin Chennai's big video conference session with Mr. Carmen DeArdo, Senior Director, VSM Research and Design, Principal Flow Advisor at Tasktop, and the author of the book titled A Leader's Guide to Digital Transformation on Value Stream Management in Software Delivery using the Flow framework. I think a very interesting topic. This is going to be a very important one as well for the Indian software industry. Before Carmen starts his talk, I have the pleasant duty of doing three things. One, setting the context for the session and introducing the speaker. And then the third, brief intro about Spin Chennai to Carmen and to those who are joining new. So India cannot be a land of order takers anymore, whether in the software industry or the BPM, business process management, or in any other aspect. Slowly, we are rising in front of the world in terms of whatever parameter we are looking at. The way digital transformation, we have been very swift in adopting. In digital payments, India is leading the world today. Global Innovation Index, we are fast rising. Of course, software services and BPM, we are one of the leaders in the world. So India was doing 25% of GDP. It will be very difficult to digest this, but India was doing 25% of world's GDP 400 years ago, and we have lost slowly a whole lot of past glory. Even our turmeric has been patented by other organizations. So we have, I think that those days are coming back again in terms of exhibiting what we are capable of. If you take Indian IT industry, we have created a lot of jobs, global brand and all that. But still, if you take the global products, the global infrastructure and solutions, India is not in the League of Nations, the top nations. So though we are doing more than 200 billion in software services, business process management, and in business process management, India does about 15% of global business process is done from India, right? It will be very interesting to know that 15% of world's business processes are getting processed from India. So there is with the automation rising, intelligent process automation, the opportunity to move this from 15% to 50%, 60% is really huge. I think then India will be right at the core. Most of the world's business process will be operating out from India, the core. Then I think imagine the position it will be. So the same thing can happen in many industries. So if India wants to move to the, however, we will focus this session around the IT services and BPM. If India wants to really move to the next level in terms of software services, product delivery, business process management, then we need to be the best in the world, operating at a superior level of performance, efficiency that the world cannot match. I think our lead position can come only when with the superior performance. So when people talk about what each country is famous for, American innovation, German engineering, Japanese quality, the China price, right? I think India should stand in terms of Indian software. I think that is when we can say we have arrived. right? We still see the industry plagued by various problems. We lose customers due to slow delivery times. Predictability and certainty is missing in many cases. Too little margin coming out of certain deals. High level of attrition in our software companies. I think that there are various areas for improvement, but one of the big improvement areas is efficiency, improving efficiency, predictability, performance. I think that is where today's speaker, Mr. Carmen, is going to really highlight and provide lots of insights with the value stream map. So if you see what is the purpose of a value stream map, right? It is a proven lean technique and which can be applied in any industry or business where multiple departments and multiple phases before delivery to the customer. You want to ensure that we have a smooth integration between all these functions, eliminate waste, and provide the optimum level of efficiency to create desired outcomes. I think with that as the key goal, the value stream mapping provides a clear view of integrating all these in achieving the business outcomes. There are various steps. At least there are 7 steps is famous. So this is also applicable in lean manufacturing. Almost every industry it has applications. Whether it is in processing raw materials, manufacturing physical goods, developing software, or handling administrative work, or managing employees, value stream map can be applied to any of those areas. So if you see some of the benefits, it identifies clearly the waste or the non-value adding activities. It makes the processes efficient. It aligns cross-functional teams for greater buy-in, right? Once people buy into the real purpose as to why we are doing that, then I think that itself will provide tremendous benefits. And it provides a center point for a conversation on future growth as well. It is not about just efficiently improving the current activities. It is also about positioning for future growth. I can go on and on, but we want to listen to Carmen. I think this is a very, very important topic focused on doing the right things. So having said that, Carmen has been providing value stream management architecture consulting to help enterprises accelerate their flow to deliver and protect business value. This focus is on working with teams to improve their flow across product-based value streams, utilizing an integrated delivery pipeline and applying the flow framework concepts, and then utilizing these learnings to design product insights to improve customer outcomes using the Tasktop flagship VSM product. He is the co-author of Standing on Shoulders, a leader's guide to digital transformation, which won the 2020 DevOps Book of the Year. I think I want you to unmute and put up your hands to give a fantastic appreciation for the 2020 DevOps Book of the Year.
Rajaram, please repeat the title, please.
The Standing on Shoulders, a leader's guide to digital transformation.
Thank you.
Okay. Which won the 2020 DevOps Book of the Year. If you go to https://devopsdoesn't.com, you can see that. His previous experience leading the implementation of Agile, Lean, and DevOps practices to accelerate delivery at a Fortune 100 company, which was recognized as 2016 Transformation of the Year by DevOps.com. I think this is fantastic. Carmen is a frequent speaker at a DevOps Enterprise Summit, All Days DevOps, DevOps Days events, and other conferences. Carmen is a free, he has co-authored several IT Revolution Forum papers, including moving from project to product. I think very highly relevant one. DevOps case studies and expanding pockets of greatness, found at itrevolution.com, forum papers. And his talk with Nicole Bryan was selected by DevOps.com as the best DevOps presentation of 2018. I think it's a very legendary developments with Carmen. He is named by Tech Beacon twice as a top 25 100 DevOps leader to follow and a top 100 IT DevOps leaders. Carmen started his career at Bell Labs with a focus on the architecture and the design of high performance, high available telecommunications and intelligent network systems with 3 patents in software engineering. I think we are very, very thankful to you for taking the time off to be with us. So I will now transition to a brief mention about SPIN to Carmen and to those who are new. SPIN Chennai is 25 years old as a knowledge ecosystem, is affiliated to Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute, as well as ISACA, the global body. Our vision is to build a world-class knowledge ecosystem, which is very compelling, highly relevant, and value-adding to the people and industry, distinctively futuristic, and passionately co-creative. We have a 4,000-member knowledge ecosystem comprising of CXOs, senior leaders, board members, SVPs, VPs, HR, marketing and sales professionals, quality and delivery professionals who form the core. Banking, financial services, telecom, automotive, manufacturing industry, verticals, senior consultants, mentors, academia, and several other institutions are part of SPIN Chennai. Some of the international gurus who have been associated with SPIN Chennai include the famous Dr. Watts Humphrey, who was hailed as the father of software quality in the world, in whose honor we have instituted the Watts Humphrey Award, which happens every year with huge participation from the industry. We have had several international gurus associated with SPIN Chennai, including Louis Trigger from Israel, Theory of Constraints expert, who directly worked with Eli Goldratt, the author of Theory of Constraints. We had Dr. Bill Curtis from US, who has contributed to the development of the world famous CMMI model, People CMM. Professor Manu Ora, one of the top management consultants from the US. Mark Johnson, who is a management thought leader and co-founder of InnoSight from US. Dr. Jeff Sutherland, co-founder of Scrum. He was here during 2021 2 times with the SPIN Chennai. Mr. Michael Krigsman, author of CXO Talk, with more than 1,000 appearances. Mr. Barry Kriggs, ex-Microsoft CTO. Steve Beres, senior partner at Bain. Manuel Arriaga of Google, YouTube. Mr. Lakshmi Shankar of Twitter. Dr. David Duncan of InnoSight, and several others, thought leaders from India as well as globally have been at SPIN Chennai over the years. So I have no more things to say at SPIN Chennai, but currently considering the time and the focus of this session, I would encourage you to look at spinchenai.org, which has got all the details. And those who are not yet members of SPIN Chennai, I would encourage you to become individual members. And if you want the company to become a member, that option is also available, corporate membership. We have all the leading companies, many of the leading companies who are members of SPIN Chennai. So coming to this session, please, Carmen just updated that instead of waiting to post your questions in the chat at the end, he said, whenever you have any question, please open up your mic and ask your question, right? Or post it in the chat, whichever way you prefer. So keep your audio otherwise in mute so that the session, there is no disturbance to the session. I encourage at this point, each of you to unmute, put your hands together to welcome Carmen to address Spin Chennai community. Over to you,
Thank
Carmen.
you. Well, thank you for that very gracious introduction. I'm very happy to be here today and be able to share some of these thoughts with you. And again, feel free to ask questions or post questions as we go through the discussion, because I think the questions add a lot of value and having discussion about some of these topics. So with that, I mean, I think I've already said enough about me, but here's the book, Standing on Shoulders. A lot of what's written here actually came from my experiences in Bell Labs, where I learned a lot about, Schuhart started his career at Bell Labs in 1925, working with Deming. A lot of those concepts that actually apply to value stream mapping and value stream management actually had their roots in a lot of the work that was done there and even previous work. So let's talk a little bit about value stream management. Value stream management, I believe, takes value stream mapping to another level in the sense that it allows us to actually look at the source of truth and how work is done and goes through the value stream in the digital tools that we use, right? From ideate, the planning tools that we use, create, the agile management tools, things like Jira and ADO, things like that, and then through release and operate. And so it's really an emerging approach. It's just become recognized as a space by Forrester and now Gartner. And we've developed one of the first products, a leader in this market, to actually allow customers, users to actually see how work is moving through their value stream in order to understand where is the flow being impeded and what can be done, what ideas there are to actually improve the flow and the delivery and protection of value. And we're going to talk about both aspects of that. So really, value stream management, the idea is to increase the impact of Agile and DevOps. As pointed out, I think we want to go faster, right? But unless we know where the work is slowing down or being impeded, we can make the wrong decisions on where to invest. And we'll talk about that some. And also, I think companies are finding it difficult to move from project to product. Project management is really a discipline from last century. It was for building things that were deterministic, things like dams or buildings or things like that. As we know, software is a creative process, it's a complex process, and you really need a different approach to it. When I was at Bell Labs, we were actually already in a product model. But when I joined, after I left and was working with other Fortune 100 companies, I realized they were still stuck in this project management model, which was creating issues and not being able to get the full benefit from Agile and DevOps. So the first question that comes up is, well, what is a product value stream? Well, this is the definition that we use. It's those end-to-end activities that you need to deliver value to a customer through a software product or service. And the important thing about a value stream is it always begins and ends with the customer. And you have to look at things from the customer perspective. I think sometimes when we have metrics and we start to measure things, we're measuring them from our perspective as delivering the service or product rather than our customer's perspective. And that gets us sometimes into having the wrong types of discussions or making the wrong types of decisions. Now, it typically is underpinned by an application or a set of systems. But the key there is really around the value stream network and the dependencies that we have. And I'm going to talk about that a little more detail later. And then the key, of course, is to continuously be able to get feedback. So by by having the ability to deliver more quickly, that's a competitive advantage. You can get more feedback, you can get it more quickly, you can get these new ideas out. You know, the idea that you're going to develop a perfect idea for a new product or a new feature is really erroneous. You can have good ideas, but you need to get them in the market and get feedback. And whoever can do that more quickly is obviously going to have a huge competitive advantage. And under this, you really want, you know, the lean concept of a pull model. So even though companies that believe they're practicing Scrum or Agile, actually, when you get into their system and their value stream network, there are areas where work is still being pushed on teams, which creates too much work in progress, creates too much context switching. And those things are many times invisible and not well understood when you're actually looking at what it takes to get a new feature or product capability to market. So value stream management, that's a key component of this, is to provide visibility. If you can't see, you can't manage, you can't measure. And if you can't measure, you can't manage or improve. And we kind of have a saying, either your value stream network is managing you or you're managing it. And so, you know, these networks exist. We may not understand them totally or holistically, but they do exist and they're contributing to the results we get. So the sooner that we can make them visible and measure them, the better we can improve them, so that we can provide a better experience for our customers. So in our model, when we look at products, we think of them kind of in these three layers. Many times when you start to talk to an organization about products, they only think about the business products. They only think about the things they're selling in the marketplace. But really, the engine of an organization is in their internal products and their platform products. So while these business products serve your external customers, your internal products are really serving your internal customers. These are where you have dependencies, right? These are things like, you know, maybe you have a common billing platform or common service platform, or something that, you know, you've invested to make common across all your products because it saves you in cost, it saves you in quality. However, what we've sacrificed many times for cost has been speed. And the whole idea of IT as a cost center has driven us into some of these silos, which have not been able then to address time to market and speed. Now, some people will just say, well, get rid of your silos. Well, I don't think that's a reasonable approach. I think there's a reason that we want to have expertise in certain areas, be it our internal products or our platform products, which are things like our tool chain, things like security, performance, service management. There are reasons that we want to have that deep level of expertise and capability. So the goal really here is to take advantage of that in a way that also allows us to deliver more quickly and get that feedback more quickly. So how do we do that? Well, again, here's just further examples of what I'm talking about, right, in terms of these supporting products and platform products. And the idea is not that we don't need these, right? We need security testing. We need performance monitoring. We need the ability to have environments for doing development and testing. But there are ways to do this so that they're either self-service or automated. So when you actually look at the work that's flowing through the value stream that needs these capabilities, they can take advantage of them without having SLAs or the team involved in a lot of human-focused activities to create these. And that's where some of the DevOps practices come in. So the DevOps practices work hand in hand with value stream management, in that value stream management identifies where there are opportunities, and then part of the way to mitigate that or address those are with some of the DevOps practices or anything that, you know, may impact people, process, technology. And we'll talk about that. So what I'm going to show now is kind of a customer experience and try to show the difference between, what SAFe calls an operational value stream versus development value streams. So if you look at an operational experience, and in this case, we're going to talk about the situation that I was involved with when I was working with a company around, automobile insurance and claims due to a storm and having cars flooded. And so there's some weather event. And so people start to take pictures and gather information so that they can file a claim. And they want to do that online if they can. However, maybe that fails. So if that fails, then they have to have, talk to a customer service rep who has to then maybe on behalf of the customer file the claim. It then has to be processed, waits for approval. Finally, then the vehicle is able to be fixed. You submit your final paperwork. You get your payment either directly or through the provider. The money's in the bank and your car's good as new. So that's kind of the customer experience. But what's actually happening within your value stream network to support this? Well, you may have a value stream there that deals with that product, and those pictures are entered through a mobile app. But then maybe at the next point where you're working on the online claim, something happens. So now, you're working off of, this other contact center PBS. Now, as things go, that will go to this core claim system. Another system may be involved, or another internal product is around appraisals, notifications. As you can see, there's a lot of different interactions here with products that are some of which we would consider business and customer facing, but others are these internal shared products and others are platform products. So all these things have to work in concert in order for things to get done on behalf of the customer. If we just focus in isolation on these, we're going to lose the bigger picture of how to improve the customer experience. We need to understand, business agility requires that all these things can respond to market changes. And, as new opportunities are identified, we have to be able to have capacity for new work and deliver those new ideas with speed, which get us into concepts like flow load and flow time. So what that means is, you actually have a kind of a design hierarchy if you think about it, right? You have these internal products, you have the external facing products, you have your internal products, you also have your platform products. You have to have views of all of the work and the flow of all of those products if you're actually going to understand where are your bottlenecks. I mean, there's a reference to Goldratt and the goal, and I talk about that a lot. There's a classic example in that book of investing in the wrong place, bringing in a robot, cranking and assuming you have to have the robot running at 100% utilization, when in fact, once it got above, I think 29%, it was flooding the downstream components of the value stream. So by focusing in the wrong place, you can actually create problems for the flow of work through the value stream. Are there any questions up till now? Does this make sense?
Sorry about that, Cap.
Any questions?
No. Sorry about
No?
that.
Oh, okay, that's fine. So, what this also means is that leadership, which has a role in this, right? Leaders own the systemic problems that need to be addressed. And then, teams can have ideas of how to improve the way that they work. So you need to provide views of work at all levels that are tailored to them in order so they can understand and have change and things that they can have effect on. So there's many stakeholders here involved, but they need to see, and they may need a different lens, but it has to be based on the single source of truth. And that single source of truth is really how work is flowing as you're tracking it through your tool chain from ideate all the way to release. And what you want then is for each of these areas to get actionable insights and metrics for continuous improvement. Because again, if you can't see how things are progressing, you can't really be sure that where you are investing is actually making a difference in terms of the results for your customer. So I'm going to back up a little bit now and talk about some of the theory. And this was developed by Dr. Mick Kirsten, who's the CEO at Tasktop. And the company I work with, I was lucky enough to, we were customers of Tasktop starting around 10 years ago. So I got to meet Mick, and I got to see as this kind of genius develops on what he called the Flow framework, and have a lot of discussions with Mick. So in the Flow framework, there are basically 4 things that flow in software delivery. One is features. So that's the thing that we're most familiar with. Those are new product capabilities, right? It might be a new financial product, insurance product, some capability in what you're delivering, a banking product or banking feature. But then, unfortunately, right, we have defects. We want to minimize these, but they still have to be recognized and addressed because they also flow and they're part of protecting business value. Risks are things dealing with security and compliance. Risks are the things that get surfaced by your dynamic and static security scans. We know the cost of not addressing these in a timely way. It doesn't do us any good to gain customers if we're going to lose them because they're of data breaches or we get fines due to compliance issues. So risks have to be treated as first-class flow items as far as delivery is concerned. And then you have debts. And debts are not just technical debt, they're really any improvement in terms of people, process, technologies. Debts are the things that when you would apply a new DevOps practice, like automated testing or monitoring and test environments, those are things that are really an investment in future feature delivery. So when you think about it, and again, these come from Mick's book, Project to Product, where he introduces the Flow framework. So if you're not familiar with that, that's another great book to pick up by IT Revolution. So when you think about this, there's really these concepts of value generation, which is where features come into play, but also debt, because debt is an investment in future value generation. And then protection, which has to do with risks and defects. And based on where your product is from a maturity standpoint, there might be more of a focus on one than the other. Sometimes as a product matures, there may be less development of new features, but you always have to have a focus on the risk and defect component. As you have a newer product, there's going to be more of a bias towards the feature investment and the debt investment. But you still have to keep your eye on risks and defects, or you can fall into what we call the debt spiral, which is where you have so much debt accumulating that you have no capacity left for features. Mick talks about some of this in his book and some talks he gives where companies became so bogged down with debt and their code base became so fragile that making changes was very difficult, very time consuming. Changes created more defects. And before long, that product, that organization was consumed with just working off defects that they had no capacity anymore for features or to deliver features more quickly. So if you fall into that debt spiral, it is very difficult to get out of it. And some entire companies have actually, markets have been lost because companies couldn't fall out of that once they got into it. So you have to keep your eye on all 4 of these items. They all have to be visible, and you have to measure elements of flow for all of these things to make sure that you're investing in the right place at the right time, given the strategy for this product. So what are the flow metrics that we talk about from the flow framework? Well, one is what I kind of alluded to right there, which is flow distribution, which is the ratio of these 4 items that are being completed. So if my flow distribution says, in the last quarter, 60% of what I actually delivered were defects, that could raise a question of, well, is that what you had planned? Is there a quality issue here? Why is it that 60% of what was delivered for this product in the last quarter were defects and where only 20% were features? Sometimes when I show this to some of the customers we're working with, and I have the benefit of working with, we work with almost half of the Fortune 100 companies. So we have very large companies, well-known companies we work with. Many times they're surprised when we show them this information. They go, really? That's really what we did? We were 50% of what we delivered were defects? So that generates a discussion about, well, what is our intent and why is that happening? But again, the first step is just understanding and be able to see this, to know, what would that, why is this happening? If you ask me for just one quality metric, I would use the flow distribution is for defects, because that really tells me what it's costing me as a customer, right? If I was investing in something and when I was talking to, the team that was producing the product I was investing in, and they were saying, well, yeah, what did we do last quarter? Well, 60% of what we did was defect mitigation. I would not be happy, right? I'd say, well, that's not generating, expanding our market, generating more customers. So we have to look at it from that perspective. I don't think we do. Again, putting that customer hat on, what does this mean and what can we do to address those things? Risk. Many times when we work with customers, they're spending very little on the risk mediation, which again raises a red flag. Well, you have security scans, they're raising issues. How long is it taking you to mitigate those? Yes, is there a question?
Carmen, yeah, you talked about the business impact of defects or the things what we work on. Very often that is not talked about or that is not quantified. We always look at the process metrics, but really
Right.
the business impact metrics. So how do we carry forward in this flow distribution?
That's a great question. If you hold that thought for a couple slides, we'll talk about it. And if I don't, get back and we'll ask the question again. But that's a great insight. So yes, a key component of this is we have to speak the same language, right? If IT is speaking one language and business is speaking another language, we have to communicate. So how do we speak that language of the business? How do we understand what's important to the business? We're going to talk about that. Because what accompanies the flow metrics are the business results. For improving flow, to that point, without improving business results, then it's like, to what end are we doing this? So, talk a little bit more about the flow metrics and then we'll get going here. Then the next one's flow velocity. So that's a measure of throughput and productivity. So how many features, how many defects, how many risks, how many debt did we actually deliver in the last month, 2 months, 3 months, based on the time unit. Flow efficiency is a measure of work versus weight. So it's sort of like utilization in the lean concept. So this says, because what we're really looking here is not people utilization. That's another mistake we make. We say, well, we have to keep our people busy. Well, people will find a way to be busy. That's not a problem, right? But you really need to understand, where's the work weight? In a factory setting, you can see where inventory is building up. You can see where things are not moving across the line. In software, how do we get that view? Where is inventory piling up? Where are things waiting? We have to watch the work. The work is what's of value. Customer doesn't really care how busy the people are. They care about where their stuff is. So that's where our eye needs to be. And then flow time is a measure of that speed, again, of the work through the value stream. And it has to be the entire value stream from beginning to end. And then flow load is very important because it's a leading metric of work in progress. And we know that too much work in progress can negatively impact productivity and flow time and happiness of the team. So that's a key that has to get under control first if you're actually going to make improvements. Now, the door metrics are something that's, become very popular, and they have value, right? The lead time, which is just code commit to release, and all the rest of them. And a lot of times organizations will say, well, we're doing the door metrics. Why do we need these? Well, it's because the door metrics will get you off the ground, but you really need the flow metrics to measure the entire journey. It's not good just to be, it's not enough. The door metrics are necessary, but not sufficient. It's not enough just to be good in one part of the value stream. You have to be good across the entire value stream. And so the flow metrics are designed, with value stream management to see the entire journey, the entire holistic view of work, to understand, again, where things aren't flowing so that you can invest and improve your flow. So some of the key questions that we want to be able to answer is, how long does it take a feature to get through the value stream? Where are things waiting the longest, right? Let's say for defects. And then again, what is that distribution between the flow items, and is it what we intend? Right? There's not necessarily a bad distribution or a good distribution. It's really based on what we're trying to accomplish right now with this product. Is that what we would expect? And if it's not, then how do we address that? Now, to the point, and this was the slide I was talking about, they have to be tied to business results, right? So they have to be tied to value. Now, while we a lot of times think of value in terms of profit and loss, if you're an internal product or a platform product, you have to think about that very differently, right? Sometimes we will talk to an internal product team and say, first of all, who are your customers? And secondly, what value are you providing? And sometimes when we do that, the teams themselves aren't used to thinking that way. They're still thinking about the external products. Well, if I'm on a platform team and someone says, our goal is to retain market share or improve market share, what does that mean to me? That's not useful to me. My customers use me because they need environments more quickly. My customers value me because they can do monitoring, set up monitoring automatically or more quickly in an environment, or maybe do self-service performance testing or security scanning. That's the value I'm providing. That's what I have to think about. So value has to be within the context of the product itself. And many times when we think about internal and platform products, we don't think about it that way. There's a cost element, obviously, but again, it's not all about the cost, right? If all we're measuring is cost, all we're going to focus on is reducing costs. You really need to be thinking about where to invest. Quality, again, very important, because that gets into retention, that gets into the customer experience, and poor quality is going to be costly. It's only going to cost you from a customer perspective. It's going to cost you because you're having to invest more of your own capacity in mitigating defects rather than improving or expanding the capability of the product. And then a key one, which I think sometimes is not focused enough on, is happiness. And we're not talking about the happiness of the customers. Obviously, that's important. But we're talking about the happiness of the team themselves, because happy teams are productive and productive teams are happy. And many times when we measure happiness, we measure it in silos. Well, that's not good enough, right? You really need to be measuring it across a value stream, because if I'm a lead developer on a product that is working well, the work in progress is being managed, we don't have a lot of technical depth, my happiness level is gonna be a lot different than my peer who's working with a product which is riddled in technical debt, and has too much work in progress. So you can't just look at the engineering organization and say, well, are our engineers happy or not? No, we have to look at the horizontal slice of that, the product value stream, and say, what's the experience of the people who are working on this product team? Because that will alert us to things to address with that product. Like, we're not spending enough time investing in debt. The code base is too fragile. There's too much work in progress, which is creating too much context switching for this team. We have found ourselves that when our happiness score starts to slip, we have to take a look at some of those things to address them to turn that around. So it's a very important and really not something that's measured at that value stream level. So again, what's the point? Well, flow metrics are tied to business value, and they're based on outcomes, not activities. A lot of times we measure activities. We'll say, well, we're doing Scrum. It's like, well, what? I'll talk to customers and they'll say, well, what's your goal? Well, we're doing DevOps, we're doing Safe, we're doing Scrum. Well, doing is okay, but that's not an outcome. What is the outcome you're trying to get? How do you know whether you're achieving that? Because that will tell you, where you need to pivot, where you need to invest, where you need to improve. And again, those provide a feedback loop then to improve decisions. So again, the flow framework really focuses on that visibility and providing that connectivity to the business, right, of the flow metrics and the business results. And the key component of that is this element called the value stream network, right? So if you connect to the tools and you connect to the artifacts, things like features and defects and security bugs and things that are artifacts in that artifact network, that from those tools, be them Jira or ServiceNow or ADO or PlanView or whatever you're using, across your value stream, what you start to see then is, as those get mapped to products, you start to see what is the journey of work through this value stream network. In my opinion, the value stream network is really the least understood component of delivery, because what has happened over time is it's evolved, but not intentionally, right? It started with, I had this system supporting, I had one product and I had a few systems supporting it. But then I realized as we expanded, we needed to create some common products. So then we had to create interfaces between those products. And then we had to structure work in a way so that some of the work was done by this team and some of the work was sent to another team. Over time, this became very complicated. In large organizations, this is extremely complicated, and yet we don't really understand it. We didn't intentionally architect it, and therefore it's very hard to manage or improve what we can't visualize and measure. So understanding that flow, I think, is key to improvement, and the first step to that is visibility. Because if we all know that we need to improve the delivery capability. There's billions of dollars invested on new ideas and new concepts, but how do we know they're actually achieving this goal? Organizations will say, well, we're going to invest more in DevOps or automated CI/CD or automated testing or whatever it is. Well, that's great, but how do you know that's really what you need right now? And how do you know that this product needs it? And how do you know that every product needs the same thing? They generally don't. So you really need to know, where does you as an organization or product need to invest? And how do you know if that investment's paying off? You need some compass. If you're going to go on a journey to improve, you need a compass. The flow metrics can serve as that compass to say, okay, this is what that improvement did. This is how it impacted your flow. If it's a good idea, then you can scale it and operationalize it. But sometimes you're going to learn things that you say, okay, that probably didn't work the way you intended, so let's try something else. Well, in order to do that, you need this visibility and you need these measures. And there's a lot of anti-patterns that we see here, right? A lot of times the answer is, well, we want to go faster, we just need more developers or testers or whatever your role is, but usually it's developers or testers. Well, how do we know? And we're going to show some examples here where that is the wrong decision in some cases. Another anti-pattern is we believe, well, if we start things more quickly, then they'll get finished more quickly. Well, we know that's not true. I call this the builder's dilemma, right? Where if I start more houses, I'll complete the houses more quickly. Well, I won't. If I start more things in progress that creates more context switching, we actually become less efficient and we slow everything down. So we have to know what's the appropriate amount of things that we can handle across the value streams. Many times you'll hear about WIP limits, but WIP limits typically are only applied in a small component of the value stream around development. You really need to look at your WIP limits across your entire value stream. And then, as I said, it's kind of applying things mechanically. It's like saying, well, we're going to come in and we're going to improve automated testing across the entire enterprise. Well, maybe that's not, I'm not saying automated testing is a bad idea, but what I'm saying is that really, do you have a single anecdote to every problem, right? Do you have a single medicine to give all your patients? Some, it's one product might have an issue with quality, but another product might have an issue on the left-hand side of the value stream, which, is getting work to the teams or waste associated with preparing work. So you can't just assume that what's good for one part of the organization is to be good for the entire organization. You really need to look at this from a value stream perspective. There may be systemic issues that you want to address globally, but there's a lot of local issues that maybe need another way to improve. And a lot of times the OKRs, what I see is drive local optimization and don't improve the goal. And we'll talk about that a little. So, here's an example of things that we found just to back up some of this is, in one case, we were working with an organization and found out that, they had a relatively low flow efficiency, and we looked at where work was waiting, and it was in this ready for QA state. So, on the right-hand side of the value stream, the longest state that work was waiting in was in QA. And when we talked to the leader, this was their quote, was that, every time I talk to one of my organizations, they always say they want more developers. But our ratio of developers to QA folks is 18-1. And that disturbed her, in this case, this was disturbing to her, but she didn't really have the data to show how this was impacting them. So now with this information, it became even more clear where to invest. It wasn't more developers, it was something related to quality assurance practice. We provide views like this, which shows how long it takes work to go from ideate through release. And many times the bottleneck is not in the create phase. It can be on the left-hand side in ideate. What we see a lot of times with organizations is way too much overproduction of work based on what the team can produce. I was working with an organization last month who had a feature flow velocity of about 30 a month. They had over 4 years worth of work piled up to the left of the value stream. They had done analysis and breakdown of features so that they had, based on their current capability, it would take them 4 years to deliver all the work that they had made ready on the left-hand side. That's overproduction. That's waste. We don't see it that way, right? If this was a brick and mortar store, that would be like ordering 4 years worth of supplies for my product, like 4 years worth of pizza dough. I mean, who would do that, right? If all of a sudden a truck came up with 4 years worth of pizza dough and you had ordered that, your owner would say, Carmen, what are you doing? Where are we going to put this pizza dough? Where are we going to store it? It's not going to be good. It's going to go stale. But yet we do this in creative work all the time because we're not thinking about it the same way. And so, a local OKR that drives that optimization can actually work against us, as in Goldrat's example. And so if we don't know this, how do we know where we need to invest? Or in this case, ensure that we're not overproducing in one part of the value stream when we really need help in another part of the value stream, which could be in create or release. Any thoughts on this? Does this resonate with things like this?
Hey, yes, Carmen. No, definitely.
Can you
And
able to hear me, Carmen?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for your thought-provoking talk, actually. So what I
it's not
see,
all completed. I think he has to go.
Yeah,
He has few
yeah.
more slides.
yeah. Shall I put my question or wait until he completes?
No, no, no. Please,
No.
please.
Yeah, question's fine.
Yeah. So what I see is a chaos happening in the business decision between process decision, technology decision, and business decisions. They all see different data and patterns and take the decision. There is no synchronization in the decision, which lead to all this chaos.
Exactly. And that kind of leads into one of my next stories, which is around prioritization challenges, right? So we were working with a team and they had too much work in process, right? I mean, one of the things that you can do, if you're familiar with Little's law, is you can kind of look at your flow velocity. In a stable system, your flow velocity and your exit rate and your arrival rate should be in sync. So your flow velocity essentially is a proxy for your arrival rate. So your flow velocity and your flow time can actually, the product of those things should be equate to how many items you have in your system in a stable system. And what we find almost across the board is that work is aging, work is being neglected, there's too much work in progress. These systems are not stable. And so we were talking to one of these organizations and they were very good at getting stories done, but stories didn't really deliver value to the point, right? I mean, you needed a number of stories. It was features that were actually carrying the value. And so every time they did a PI planning session, they were trying to satisfy a broad array of stakeholders. And so they would start they might have already 40 features in progress, but instead of finishing them, they were going to start 5 more features because they wanted to ensure the satisfaction of those stakeholders that something was getting done.
So here is the clash between the product decision and the business decision.
Yes.
Exactly. So the more and there is a people decision HR takes in different places. So the more the gap between these decisions keep on creating the chaos, more is the summary I get.
Right. Correct. That if you're not really aligned, you're going to make the wrong decisions in one part of your value stream that it has a negative implication on another part. But if you're only looking, to your point, at your component and you have an OKR to create more features, then you think you're doing a good job by getting more and more things ready and started, even though downstream it's creating chaos. And the customer is actually getting less. But if everybody is only looking at their part, they're not seeing that picture. And that's what we're trying to do here, is get people to see that end-to-end view so that we can start to align those priorities and understand what we're capable of, and ensuring that these decisions are in fact in the best interest of the business and the customers.
Thank you, Carmen. One more thought process. Sorry for interruption. Now, one of the software giant in India talking about design thinking, where your value is optimized and everything. What is your stake on your?
No, I agree. I talk a lot about design thinking, but what I try to talk, and we'll talk a little more about this in a few slides, is focus again on the whole, right? Are we doing systems thinking? I talk a lot about, I was lucky enough at Bell Labs to get a lot of exposure to Deming concepts. And one of the keys there is systems thinking. And are you really working on optimizing the system? And many times we're not, right? Because we're not really thinking about it from the outcome of the customer experience, and how the system as a whole needs to operate to improve that experience. So,
Yeah. Hang
you
on.
know,
One more
this,
question. So, or you want to finish it?
well, no, this is just the visual I use sometimes around the builder's dilemma, right? Is, you know, you were starting more houses, but that's not getting people in the houses. That's not closing on the houses, right? That's what we do a lot of times in our, you know, we fall into these patterns of, you know, we have a saying, stop starting and start finishing. You know, that gets into this concept because, again, when we don't see it and we aren't aligned on that, it's very easy to fall into this trap. But yes, go ahead.
So my question is, where and how do you find opportunities, and how do you get your client convinced, especially work for IT services? Everything is dependent on the enterprise client, right? Especially
Yes.
the director whom you report to, if you're a manager or whoever. Basically, it goes through the director and to the next level. So how do you convince them, or what is the, you know, they ask us to do POV, right? Or, you know, POC or point of use or proof of
Right.
concept. So where do you get, or how do you get started with that? And how do you convince them this is going to work? That's the one I'm looking for. How do you, okay, readily I can, now I have the framework, I have the metrics. So how do I get started?
So I think, you know, one of the first things that we do in an engagement, right, is the first thing that I think we have to understand that's valuable is just the knowledge and the visibility. I mean, sometimes I talk about it in terms of an MRI or having a, you know, Mick gave a talk where he talked about providing a functional MRI of the organization. There is value in knowing things, even if you haven't yet been able to address them, right? You can't really get results until you first understand and have visibility. So the first thing that the first value that we can provide, which I think is immense value, is just telling the true story of how work is progressing, which again creates a lot of surprise many times to the organization. Now, maybe people in the teams understood this, but many times the executives did not, right? So they didn't understand. So just being able to say things like, well, you know, what information, you know, what do you really know how long it, so I will talk to a chief security officer and I'll say, do you know how long it takes to mitigate your security risks? Many times the answer is no. Right? So here's an organization, right, that spends billions of dollars across the industry. We spend billions of dollars, again, this is activities on security tools. We have security professionals, they get certifications, we run scans, we create reports, we have meetings. Okay, but what's your outcomes? Do you know how long it takes? Do you know how much investment you're making in addressing risk versus these other things? The answer is no. Now, the CISO loves it because they're saying, yes, this is what I need. I can't get this, right? I don't understand this. So it's finding those key stakeholders in the organization that understand the value of being able to see the work, understand where there's real opportunities to invest, and then demonstrating how much money today is being spent where it's really not giving you the you know, you really don't know what results you're getting from all those investments. And what really drives it is stories, right? So I mean, I can talk all day and I can have slides, but it's starting small with a few teams and having them experiment and create stories. The stories, and I talk a little about culture here, and I may be going long, so you might have to keep me going if I'm falling behind, but the culture component is critical to that. I'm going to get to that. So maybe just let me go through and then we'll talk a little about the culture, because I think that's key to the transformational aspect of this. So, you know, here's an example I call Where's My Pizza, but it's another example of a local optimization where if you have a team that's just focused on making pizza boxes, you could spend a lot of money making boxes. You could spend money having rooms for more boxes. But again, that's not how you make money. You make money by delivering pizzas. So are you really investing in things? Are your OKRs set up that are really in line with your goal, or are they just in line with local optimization? Local optimization is the enemy of lean thinking. And a lot of times it becomes very easy to think about things in a locally optimized way. That's where you need this system thinking, because again, we really need to go from, a lot of the work in Mick's book was based on work that Carlota Perez has done. It's really moving from being a cost center to investment center. Right? We can't, as was pointed out, we can't be order takers. We can't just be measured by cost. We have to be measured, we have to be seen as a place to invest. And you can't improve your speed of delivery unless you can first measure it. And then the real key is having a data-driven continuous improvement culture. So again, here's some inhibitors to flow that we see, dependencies, wait states, lack of that end-to-end visibility, manual activities. But the key is really around the culture. So I'm going to talk about that. But the idea is really that you have to architect, again, for the flow and speed of delivery. You have to have a way to measure that. You then want to use those in retrospectives to say what's slowing us down, how can we go faster, right? And then, there are ideas. People within the organization have lots of ideas if you can give them the capability to raise them and experiment and actually get into a model of continuous improvements, which are dead items, which have to be prioritized and have to be made visible just like your other work. If you don't make them a priority, you're not going to be able to improve. Gene Kim talks about the most important work a team does is not their delivery work, it's their work to get better. And so that's a key concept here. So again, culture, though, is the key, right? Yes, there are lots of tools, there's lots of technology, but if you don't have the right culture, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that. And as I said, a lot of times these vertical silos will create disruption in the flow of value. And so that organization and functional affinity negatively disrupts horizontal flow. You have to start thinking horizontally. And you have to get into optimizing the performance in the entire system and balance that practitioner feedback with taking a systems approach. So this whole idea of quality circles, I think, is important. Right? People doing the work are the ones with the most expertise. You have to empower them. And then the leaders really are doing the systems thinking. So this is where you get your stories. This is why I always say, and I talk about this in my book, start small, right? You don't start with a reorg. Sometimes when people say, well, we want to move and we want to do a transformation, the first thing they think is a reorg. The reorg is the last thing that you go. The first thing you focus on is getting your value stream and your process improved, right? And then deciding at times, well, would an organizational change help support this? So the first thing that you want to be able to do is start small and have a team that can start a story. So for example, when I was at a Fortune 100 company, we started with 2 teams in different areas. And we basically said, we have one true north, which is we're going to measure speed. Right now, of course, quality and costs still were in play, but our focus was on speed. And we provided just a simple flow metric, which was flow time. And we said, we want you to come up with experiments that can help improve flow time. We will then run them. We had the business on board. This was aligned. It wasn't like something we were doing in the margins or secretive. And they didn't get a pass of doing their business delivery, but they were so excited about this and they were so energized to try these things that it actually improved their delivery capability as we were running these experiments. So for example, an experiment was, one at the time, Docker was a new concept and there was a desire to use Docker, and people were saying, well, you technology people, you just want to play with the new tool. So I said to the person, if we want to experiment with this, we need to tie this into a customer experience. How would we use this to actually improve something from a customer perspective? So they had an automated test suite. It took 25 hours to run. So they came up with an experiment that by using Docker and creating multiple environments, they could reduce that 25 hours down to 12 minutes, which was the time for the longest test. They did their show and tell on that, and we had executives attending it. That raised a lot of eyebrows. That got a lot of people excited. Now, if we had to make a critical change to this product and we had to do regression suite, we could do the entire suite in 12 minutes. Later that year, we actually had an experience during a weather event where we had to make a change to the online claims process. And because this team had invested in these capabilities and understood where to invest and had developed some of this, they were able to make that a change that before we could have never hoped to do within weeks was actually being able to done within hours that day. And that really hammered home, made the case with the business of the importance of some of the things that we had been talking about with DevOps and Agile and things like that. Up until then, those were just buzzwords. But now when we actually put them into practice and showed this is how we can actually improve business outcomes in the customer experience, now they resonated. Now people understood why these things were important and why we needed to invest in this delivery capability. So I'm going to stop there. I said a lot after the last question. Did that help at all with the question?
Yeah, definitely covered. Yeah, it's useful.
And I talk about patterns for success, right? Don't fall in love with a process or technology. Fall in love with getting better, right? Which is Gene Kim's third way. The stories are very important. It's important that people tell their own stories and can get credit for them, right? If you try to run this transformation where you have a leader and they're getting all the exposure, that's not the best way to do this, right? You really need people to tell their own stories. Another thing, right, is you have to it requires some patience and persistence, right? This is not a linear journey. There are going to be ebbs and flows. So you have to you can't always just focus on, my team sometimes would say, but Carmen, we could be so much better. But it's like, yes, we have the opportunity to be better, but look at how far we've come. Look at the progress we've made, right? It's a continuous improvement journey. It's not something you're going to ever finish. You have to constantly be doing this. You have to be constantly vigilant. You have to constantly be measuring these things so you can continue to improve. And again, you have to be aligned with the business. This work has to be visible. It has to be understood. Its value has to be understood. We have to be measuring things from a customer perspective, not our perspective. I was having a discussion with the team once, and they were talking about the fact they could get a lot of things done within a sprint. And I said, well, okay, but does the customer get value every sprint? Their answer was no. I said, does the customer see, a flow time or lead time of 10 days? They said no. I said, well, okay, then what is the customer's experience, right? If I drop my car off on a Monday to get repaired and I pick it up on Friday, that's 5 days. If somebody says, well, it was only on the lift for 45 minutes, so I didn't have my car for 5 days. It's great that when you finally got around to it, it only took you 45 minutes. That's not what I care about. We're measuring the 45 minutes. It's the 5 days that counts. We have to start thinking like our customer. We have to start, no matter what we're doing, we're part of a value stream. We have customers. There's a value associated with what we're producing. We have to understand that. We have to be able to measure that. We have to be able to improve that. And that's lacking a lot of times in almost all cases, especially when you get into, some of the internal products that we have in the organization.
Carmen, sorry, again, Murugan this side. See, most of the time, there is a huge gap between what customer perspective and business perspective. A customer always want more, fast and cheap, but business may not support it up. Okay, we are sandwiched between these two, business perspective and customer perspective, actually.
Right. That's a great point. And I think that's where a lot of times we have discussions around flow distribution, right? So a lot of times when a business, you know, if they went to Gemba and they, I mean, they typically don't, although it'd be nice if they did for internal business partners. If you look at Gemba, they think, okay, there's, 30 people working on this product. I'm getting 30 people's worth of capacity for features, right? That's what they think about. Features, 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 features. Well, is that really what you want? Think about this for a second. You not want time on risk, right? You don't want data breaches. You don't want compliance issues. Don't you want some investment? What's an appropriate investment to spend on risk? How about that, right? You have to start educating at least some of our business stakeholders have to become savvy and have discussions around the fact that if I have a fleet of trucks and I run them across country doing deliveries and I don't maintain them and I don't change the oil and I don't change the tires, eventually someone is going to have a problem, right? And sometimes that's how we run these projects. Because they're a project and all we focus on is the delivery, a project manager doesn't want to deal with technical debt. They're not incented to deal with technical debt. Projects are temporal. Products are what has to be sustainable. One of the S's that we forget in lean of the 5 S's is sustainability. You wouldn't survive very long if you ran a fleet of trucks or airlines and didn't focus on maintenance and other things necessary or improvements. You wouldn't stay in business long. We have to have those conversations with the business. Now, again, no one really wants to pay for defects, but they're still a necessary part of customer protection. So the idea that all you're paying for is feature delivery, that's an unrealistic expectation. The other thing is around time of delivery, right? So what we're doing now with flow time is we're finding, and it's on LinkedIn. So if you follow me on LinkedIn or you search for me, I have some articles and some of the things I talked about. One of the things I talk about is your metrics may be lying to you. So what does that mean? Well, many times what I'll see with an organization is they're measuring how long it takes to deliver something to their customer from their perspective. But when we actually look beneath the surface, what we find is a lot of aging work, aging WIP, neglected WIP. And so maybe their time is being reported to be 30 days. But maybe when we actually look at their aging WIP, 70% of that work in progress may already be older than 30 days. So if you're using your metrics to set expectations on delivery, you're going to be way off, right? The things you decide to deliver, you're getting done in 30 days. But how about all this other stuff? It's marked to be in an in-progress state. Somebody thinks it's being worked on, it's being neglected. You can't use if your system is not stable, your metrics are not representative of the actual experience of work, which reflects your customer experience. The most important thing to do, first of all, is stabilize your system. Deming talks a lot about getting your systems under control. You can't improve something that's not under control. And yet we see time and time again, the systems underpinning these product value streams are not stable. And so now you're starting off now setting the wrong expectations. If they're stable, now you can start to use your metrics to set the right expectations. We have a new metric that we're putting out, which is called predictability, which says, if I want a certain confidence level to use in estimations, what number should I use based on my flow time, right? If I want 90%, maybe I have to take some factor times my flow time to set the right expectations. We're so far off in how we measure this and how unstable our systems are that we really don't have the information necessary to set the right expectations. And once we get off on setting those expectations, right, that puts us more in this point of where you just have to go faster, faster, cheaper, that's all we want. Well, yes, we can do things faster, and we can do things in a cost-effective way. but only if we understand and invest in the right place in order to ensure that our systems are stable and that we have the opportunity to improve flow. And so we have to educate not just, the whole organization needs to understand these concepts of value stream management. If we're really, and speak the same language. And again, it's a journey. You have to start small. Once you start to get some areas that are working this way, then you can start to turn the tide, right? But it starts again with getting those first experiences, starting with a few areas, getting some momentum, getting some traction, and then you're able to expand that across the organization. Does that help?
Hey, definitely, yes. Yes,
Thanks,
Carmen.
thanks, Karen.
So again, here's my summary, right? That most organizations are not on a product model, but are considering a shift. Again, we have to move the focus on doing something to talk about achieving. We have to start talking about outcomes. It's not enough just to say people are trained, people are doing Scrum, people are this, people are that. Okay, fine. What's our outcomes? It's really understanding outcomes. And again, work has to be visible, right? Dominica DeGrandis, who I have the opportunity to work with, has a great book called Making Work Visible. That's another book I would encourage you to buy if you don't have it. Again, we have to be able to look at each value stream individually and say, we have to be able to determine what are systemic issues we have versus what are special cases or local issues that need to be addressed. And we have to stop making investments based on anecdotes and rather make them on data related to flow. But in the end, it really is about the culture. And it's really about using this as part of embracing data-driven continuous improvement culture, which is sustainable. Those are the organizations that are doing well. Those are the organizations that will do well, in this decade and the decades to follow. And that's where we're trying to get organizations to be so that they can continue to flourish and improve, their experience for their customers. And again, here's some of the books. There's Mick's book, my book, and also there's some books in IT Revolution. If you go into resources, there's a lot of free books there that I don't think people take advantage of. There's a great library of books there, and that's one example of them. So that includes my formal part of my talk, but I don't know if there's any other questions or thoughts for today.
Raghav, maybe you can talk about the questions from the chat.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think one question that has come as impact of Agile, the pros and cons with value stream framework. Any perspectives? There is one question.
Yeah. So I think what I have seen is we haven't really reached the promise of Agile, right? Because Agile was typically been implemented locally. We almost we viewed it to be a couple places where I think it's gone off track a little bit is it's only been implemented in the middle part of the value stream. So what we find is we can go fast, but only in a certain part of the value stream. Well, that's not good enough, right? That's like, again, if I'm going cross country delivering trucks and, there's a section in the middle of the country I can go fast, but at both ends of the journey, it's very slow. That's not good enough. We have to look at Agile. And in fact, if we overemphasize just the Agile portion, again, that can turn into a local optimization. So the concepts of agility, and I think the overall goal was good. The other place I think the other place we get off track is agility is because the reason we want to be agile is because we believe there's uncertainty. We have to respond to uncertainty. But yet I still see people take agile and try to do like, I think Gartner calls water scrum fall, right? You still try to put it in a planning mindset. Well, agility is based on the ability to pivot to things in market conditions or other things that occur. And yet we're not using it that way. We're still trying to keep it like in its box in a certain part of the value stream, and we're not reaching its promise. So again, yeah, we have to look at the broader view of work and where work is flowing, and more importantly, where it isn't. And then understand, well, where is the best place to invest? It's not just about being agile in development. It's about being agile in planning, right? We may have a plan that in the next year, we're going to do these features. Well, okay, if we deliver something quickly and we get feedback, we have to be able to adapt to that. That's agile, right? Maybe we think the market's going in one place. We obviously know how disruptive the last 3 years have been in terms of all the things that the world's had to deal with. No one could have predicted that in a planning way. That's where agility needs to be used, but it needs to be used everywhere. It needs to be used in planning. It needs to be used in development. It needs to be used in operations. And so that's where understanding value stream management can allow organizations to be more agile, more responsive to the conditions that come into play. And that's where I think we failed, is that we haven't taken those concepts and applied them across the value stream. Have you used this framework in a startup company?
Yes, that's the next question.
I'm actually working with right now, well, most of our organizations are very large. I'm actually working, well, we ourselves were a startup and we were using it. I mean, we're now 15 years old, but we're still only a couple hundred people. So I guess from that perspective, we have used it. But I'm working with a cloud-based company right now that's a very small company and wants to start out. Because I think what you see happen is, as organizations start, everything is simple, right? Their value streams are simple. They only have a couple systems. Everything is great. Now they start to get market share. Now cost becomes an issue. Now consistency becomes an issue. Now you say, well, I really would be better having these single systems that did this like thing, because I don't want every customer experience to be different based on the product. Now you start to build in your silos. This is where you really then need to make sure that you're not sacrificing speed. This is where speed starts to lose its focus. So you have to be able to balance cost, quality, speed, as they're all part of that customer experience. And so the sooner that you could start, I'm actually very happy to be starting with this company, because they see right away the value that, as they grow, which they're intending to do, they need to make sure that that growth doesn't sacrifice speed. And if you don't have the compass, you won't know that. So, in a limited way, but I think it's a very important, because again, no matter where you are in your journey, some companies have said, well, we're not ready yet for this. And it's like, well, if you were going on a journey in your automobile, wouldn't you take a GPS? I mean, don't you want to know if you're going in the right direction? So everybody is ready. Everybody needs this, right? You need that view of work. You need that view of flow. You need that compass to make sure that the decisions you're making, the investments you're making, are actually improving the customer experience. So, I try to counter that, and yes, in a limited way, we have seen this, and I think the sooner the better, because again, it will get you and avoid maybe some of the debt issues that companies end up having if you start this earlier in your life cycle with a new product or a new organization. Any other questions there?
This, Carmen, the entire value stream framework itself, has it been productized by any company which is widely adopted?
So yeah, I didn't want to turn this into like a commercial for my company, but we have a product called Viz. If you go to tasktop.com, there's a lot of information on it, which actually And if you look at Forrester, Forrester has done some waves, did an initial wave on value stream management tools, which we were a leader in. And so, yes, we have a product that was built based on the flow framework in Dr. Kirsten's book, Mick's book, that implements these metrics, these business results, and also a set of insights, things like neglected WIP, aging WIP, other insights into how work is being prioritized, that we're continuing to invest in, because I think these insights are really what's important. Is the metrics are great, but you need to understand what's behind the metrics, right? What is causing, where is the disruption in flow, showing me my bottlenecks, showing me where work piles up. So yes, we have a tool called Viz that implements this. And if you go to our website, you'll see it. And then in the Forrester Wave, you'll see that there's other companies' products that are in the wave that they went through a few years ago. They're doing another wave, I think, this year.
Thank you. Maybe time for one last question.
Yeah, Carmen, Rajaram, can I take the last question?
Yes, please.
Oh, thank you. Maybe I don't know whether it is relevant or non-relevant. Do Facebook follow value stream process? Why? Because one of the board member was asking me, why don't you develop an application like a Facebook, which doesn't have any support call center, no downtime, nothing. Whereas for 1,000 user application, you are having a downtime, you are having a help desk and all those things. Your comment, please, Carmen.
Yeah, I don't have any experience. I'm actually don't even use Facebook, so I'm not a good person. I'm not really on social media much, except I am on LinkedIn. I don't know, but I would say this, that, Carla Perez talks about the turning point, and she talks about the age of software, and she talks about the companies that have kind of made it through the turning point in terms of the concepts that they've been applied that have created a gap between their performance and other companies. I mean, Amazon's an example of that, right? And I think if you look at those companies, they are, I don't have firsthand experience. Some of them I do. I don't with Amazon, but as far as working with them, they are more mature. I mean, one of the companies we work with has always worked with is BMW. BMW is very mature in value stream management concepts. We have a lot of clients in the automotive industry because they realize that this is important. We have a lot of clients in the financial and banking, insurance industries. So they understand the importance of investment and making sure they're making investments to improve customer outcomes. They can't just guess, right? You can't just spend $2, $5, $10 million hoping it'll improve your outcomes. There's too many stories of failed transformations. And so the companies that I think we see succeeding, and the gap, I think, unfortunately expanding, which I don't think is good from a world stage, right? We don't want to be dominated by a few companies that have most market share. So one of our goals is to help companies compete. And this is a key component of being able to compete with that. And again, it has to drive against that cost model, right? A lot of times what I'll see is, it's too much specialization, right? So then, a lot of companies will have separate teams for build and run. And they won't have a view actually of the product across features and defects and incidents. They won't understand what is the impact of doing an incident in terms of the software, when there's a software mediation necessary for it. We start to show them views that they've never seen before because they've treated these all as silos and they've only had metrics within those silos. And so I guess in a more general way, I think a lot of the companies that I know are being successful in the marketplace with speed of delivery and capability and being able to deliver more capabilities faster are underpinned by concepts of value stream management, flow concepts. Now, a lot of times those companies can invest enough to build their own tools and their own capabilities, but most companies can't, right? They're using the standard tools off the shelf. We provide the capability to integrate across those tools and then surface the data that are in those tools in a transparent way. So it's giving you more value out of the tools that you're using to see, again, where is the bottleneck really where you think? And it probably isn't, in my experience, once we start to share this information with customers.
Yeah, adding on to
Thank you, Carmen.
adding on to what Carmen said, Murugan, see, Facebook, Google kind of companies, they are constantly looking at innovating and coming out with the new features, new ways of doing things, that they are not bogged down by perfection and what do you call optimization of the existing operations. There, they put more focus on the innovation side rather than optimizing the operations. As a result, these kind of frameworks are not heavily stressed in those companies. I think that is my 2 cents.
No, correct, Rajaram. But if you see the brand reputation and everything, by the name of innovation, they cannot go away with their brand and reputation and everything. Still, they maintain their what you get time to log in and everything. If you see, their application is so stable and they keep on adding the features and everything. The way they're planning and everything, something we have to learn from them is my idea.
No doubt about that. See, they have to. You take Apple, the quality definitely is superb. So it is not compromising on quality, but not obsessed with optimizing the entire operation to the real what do you call comparable to the best.
True, correct, right. Thank you.
Yes, I talk a lot about don't let perfect be the enemy of good or better, right? I mean, we have to constantly be working at how to get better. And even if we can't come up with a perfect solution, we can certainly come up with an improvement, and being able to constantly invest in innovation, I think, as you said, is a key component of that. And that's where that flow distribution again comes in. If you're not investing enough in risk and debt, and we see this all the time, it's going to catch up with you, right? And so you really need a health, I sometimes talk about human beings need a healthy diet. They need a balanced diet. Well, products need a balanced diet also between features, risk, and debt. And if you're not balancing that appropriately, that product isn't going to stay healthy, and the people supporting that product are going to be unhappy as well as the customers. So that's a key part of that sustainability and improvement.
Thanks a lot, Carmen. At this point, I would like to request Raghav, the treasurer of Spin Chennai, to propose the vote of thanks.
Well, thanks, Rajaram. Thanks, Carmen, for taking the time. I know it's so early there, 7 o'clock. You started. Thanks for taking the time to speak with our Spin Chennai community. In fact, this is one of the topic that we wanted to do it, at least from project to product. And then we thought, okay, before that, we wanted to introduce flow framework, then we can move to that. And in fact, we were looking for many speakers, and then, okay, no, let's not go to others. I think this topic, we should only reach out to Carmen. So Rajaram and I, we were discussing this for quite a long time, what topic we should choose, especially on this flow framework, value stream management. I think thanks for taking. Definitely this is a head start to our community members. I'm sure at least 38 have registered. We could see only maximum of 16 at a time, but anyways, we will upload this in our YouTube channel. So you've talked about the product value streams, the need for visibility, measuring, and measuring is what you control, what you improve on, not much more than control. You emphasized on what you measure is what you improve upon, right? And then the fantastic flow diagram of the value streaming of the claims, how it happens, the pain we undergo. In fact, especially their day in and day out experiences, and then starting with your what is flow software, what flows in software delivery, and then the flow metrics, and how do you correlate it with the business results, right? All these are very useful, and especially on the VSM anti-patterns and success patterns also, not just the anti-patterns. In many of the sessions, we noticed that the speakers present only the anti-patterns, but we have seen some success patterns here. And the most important point on how to get started, or how do we, where do we implement it, especially in a client organization where you mentioned started small with few teams, experimented, then you scale it up. I think those are good set of advice. Definitely, as I mentioned, this is a head start. And once again, I thank the community members for joining today. I think it's 4:30 to almost now 6:15 in Chennai right now. And thanks once again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Raghav and Rajaram. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have
Okay.
one question from Vishwanathan. We will take it offline to Carmen and get it answered. Vishwanathan.
Well, thanks again for the opportunity. I'd be glad to come back and talk, in more depth about any of these, or even maybe show you some examples of the technology if you're interested. But thanks again. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Carmen. If ever you are in India, you should visit Chennai.
Okay, I will do that for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.